Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. We may be joined by others, and we'll just welcome them in. Welcome to the curriculum workshop for higher ed, teaching with Ed Ruscha, Streets of Los Angeles. This virtual workshop is hosted by the Getty Research Institute's Department for Academic Outreach and is designed to support those teaching at the undergraduate and graduate levels. It is part of a series that aims to support curriculum development by activating in-depth research of primary sources developed through research projects and initiatives here at the GRI. Today's workshop examines the book Ed Ruscha's Streets of Los Angeles, Artist, Image, Archive, City. We're joined today by book editors and contributors Zanna Gilbert, Emily Pugh, Tracy Stuber, and Isabel Frampton Wade. They will be using the sections of the book as pedagogical tools for archival research, new technologies of research and publishing, as well as multidisciplinary approaches to photography, archive theory, and architectural history. Some welcome notes for everyone. We will be recording the presentations. Once we enter into the Q&A portions, we will stop recording. We will ask you to use the chat to start, and we will have time for questions and answers following the end of all presentations. And I will read questions aloud for everyone, and as we get going, we can start to use the hand raise function and start the conversation from there. So welcome again, and I will turn over the workshop to Zanna Gilbert.
Good morning, everyone. Let me just get the slideshow going. Okay, I'm Zanna Gilbert, and today in this curriculum workshop, we're going to take you through our freely available online publication, Ed Ruscha's Streets of Los Angeles, Artist, Image, Archive, City, and explore how it can be used to teach new approaches to the work of Ed Ruscha, as well as the topics of image, archive, and city, as we'll be delving into in just a moment. Before we dive into that, I will give some brief context on the archive, our project, and then my colleague Emily Pugh is going to talk about the digital aspects of the project. Today, you'll be hearing from myself, Emily Pugh, as I mentioned, Tracy Stuber, and Isabel Frampton Wade. We all worked on this project together alongside Andrew Perchuk as editors of the publication. And as you can see, Tracy and Isabel have moved on to other positions, but we're coming back together today for this workshop. So, the Ed Ruscha Streets of Los Angeles archive, acquired by the Getty in 2012, is one of the most extensive visual records of a city compiled by an artist. The archive at the Getty currently comprises around 900,000 images recorded on over 50 shoots of major Los Angeles thoroughfares from 1965 until today, including Sunset Boulevard, Hollywood Boulevard, Pacific Coast Highway, and many other streets. The artist describes the collection as a living organism, as he and his team continue to document LA's streets, creating a vast and growing trove of information about the artist's adopted city. So why and how did Ruscha create this vast archive? In 1965, the artist had an idea for a book with the catchy title, Every Building on the Sunset Strip. It was a seemingly straightforward idea to photograph the built environment along the iconic mile-and-a-half length of Sunset Boulevard, but the technical challenge of capturing the street would take many months to resolve. Ruscha devised a way to motorize the photos by shooting from the window of his car. This innovation was a success, and he and his team were able to photograph both sides of the strip in one day. They added a custom motorized back to the camera, which you can see in the photograph on the right, that could accommodate extra long film stock, usually used for moving image capture. The GRI has been working on this project since 2017, We digitized over 120,000 images from the collection, used computational methods to make them searchable, and engaged with interdisciplinary scholars from fields such as urban geography, the digital humanities, architecture, and archive studies, as well as art history. The research produced as a result of their collaboration with us is published in the book we'll be looking at today. We'll give an overview of each section of the book. Here you see our contents page and how each of these sections relates to the kinds of themes and topics you might cover in an undergraduate or graduate art history classroom. The project section gives an overview of Ruscha's archive, and another essay details how the Getty processed the archive, while a third essay focuses on data visualizations as critical practice. So before we launch into those potential models for using the publication and our resources in the classroom, Emily will talk about the digital components of the project.
Thank you, Zanna. So our book, Ed Ruscha's Streets of Los Angeles, Artist, Image, Archive, City, exists as a static website, a PDF, an EPUB, and a paperback book. The book was created or produced using Quire, a freely available open source tool that allows for the simultaneous creation of publications in multiple formats, both digital and physical. Quire prioritizes long-term sustainability and longevity of digital publications, easing the burden of their production and maintenance. In addition, the resulting books in all of their formats are discoverable via all the ways you would typically look for books, including searches of resources like WorldCat and library catalogs, as well as retailers like Amazon. The design of Quire publications is fully customizable, and in addition, web-based Quire publications allow for the inclusion of multimedia, including moving image, audio, and deep zooming images. If you'd like to find out more, we encourage you to reach out to Erin Dunnigan, the Quire community lead, by emailing quire@getty.edu. In addition to the book, our project produced two interfaces that allow researchers to look through Ruscha's images, as well as other aspects of the archive. In the Research Collections Viewer, or RCV, you can search through the entirety of the archive, which is distributed across two collections. You can search the hundreds of thousands of images we digitized as part of the project by address or by text in the images, from signage, for example. The RCV also includes information related to non-digitized portions of the archive, which are viewable on-site at the GRI. A second interface, called 12 Sunsets, provides access to the 12 digitized shoots of Sunset Boulevard from the archive. This interface allows you to virtually drive down Sunset Boulevard, viewing images taken in a variety of years from 1965 to 2007. You can add additional years to compare locations across time, as well as flip the view to bring the images from the bottom to the top. These images are searchable using address, text in images, and by descriptive tags. Clicking on an image, you can see the tags and text associated with it, and you can view the image in the RCV by clicking the View Record at Getty Research Institute link. The 12 Sunsets website is a user-friendly way to browse and search key portions of Ruscha's archive. So for the rest of our presentation, we want to give you an overview of each section of the book and their relevance to teaching art history at the graduate and undergraduate levels. And Zanna's going to start us off with artist.
There we go. Thanks, Emily. So Ed Ruscha is a major figure in post-war art history who's typically understood as a pop artist as well as a conceptual and book artist, with his signature aesthetic being the celebrated deadpan, dispassionate style. The section Artist, however, explores the status of the streets of Los Angeles photographs as an artistic project deeply entwined with Ruscha's artistic practice. And the essays in this section explore how new knowledge about the street's photographs both challenge and redefine the understanding of Ruscha's career and oeuvre. The artist's relationship to design, photography, and information is nearly examined. In her essay, No Design, The Streets Photographs and Ruscha's Books, Jennifer Quick examines how the artist's technical knowledge and training in graphic design resulted in his unique no design aesthetic of visual severity in his books. Andrew Perchak focuses on the seemingly unlimited information available among the noise of the streets of LA photographs. Alice Mann highlights the tension between art and documentation in Every Building on the Sunset Strip and argues that Ruscha's photographs are indebted to the avant-garde, uncovering an optical unconscious of the city of LA and the genre itself. Margaret Iverson pushes back against the characterization of Ruscha's work as deadpan to reveal the darker modes of criticality in his paintings and photo documentation. All the authors take singular positions on Ruscha's engagement with information and communication, but they each draw out the excessive, non-rational, and obsessive nature of Ruscha's work in relation to the Streets of LA archive. They use the existence of the streets photographs to reread established understandings of Ruscha's work, especially the received idea of his work as deadpan. Mann, for example, writes, the sheer, and this is a quote, the sheer excess of his photographic documentation of those same streets as evidence in his archive embodies an act of deflection or disobedience. It ensures the authentic photographic record metamorphoses into and excessive installation-like artwork. Ruscha employs the mechanical language of photography to disrupt expectations and explore the medium's irrational potential. So key ideas and topics for discussion in this section include Ruscha's interest in information and its surreal, excessive bent. Mann, Perchak, and Iverson all see the archive as evidence of this excessive irrationality of over-information. Classroom discussions about Benjamin Bucklow's Aesthetics of Administration essay could also cast an eye to contemporary image and information culture that Ruscha seems to have been presaging, and we've had a lot of comments about how the Streets of Los Angeles archive is a sort of proto-Google Street View. Iverson's essay allows for comparisons between the photographic images in Ruscha's painting, especially his landmark Venice Biennial Commission, Course of Empire, that presents a dark image of a teetering American civilization. One idea would be to teach paintings alongside these photographs in order to show the relationship between his photographic and painting practice. While Ruscha is clear that the Streets archive is not a work of art, its status hovers between conceptual instruction and information object and a dispassionate image archive. It's interesting to consider where the line is drawn. Is it a conceptual art project that follows a schema, as Margaret Iverson argues, or a designer's image morgue, as Jennifer Quick suggests? So the section Artists asks, how can we approach this archive as an object of study that tells us as much about the artist that produced it as about the city it depicts? And thinking about the archive's latency, utility, and status. Another couple of complementary resources would be Sylvia Wolf's Whitney exhibition catalog, Ed Ruscha's photography, and Alexandra Swartz's book, Ed Ruscha's Los Angeles. And so I'm now going to pass it on to Isabel, who's going to talk about the image section.
Thank you, Zanna. I edited the image section while also working as a research associate at the GRI, in which capacity I helped to facilitate many special collections workshops on Ruscha and this archive. And I mention that because it has informed my pedagogy in the context of this archive and project of showing this archive to numerous artists, educators, school groups, and has informed how to teach themes related to image, photography, and representation across both analog and digital spaces. I'll be speaking primarily to how this section of the book and project can be useful to courses such as history of photography surveys and seminars, histories of California art and visual culture, and courses that are focused primarily on Los Angeles as well. I've used this material in courses that I've taught myself with success. Slide, please. There's 4 essays in this section. First, Britt Salveson compares Ruscha to 2 of his contemporaries in urban studies, Denise Scott Brown and J.B. Jackson, and explores their shared working approach to documenting the urban landscape. In my own essay, I turn our attention to the field of commercial architectural photography to show that artists and photographers whose professional status and methodological approaches may initially seem dissimilar were in fact using the medium similarly to examine what it meant to create portraits of Los Angeles. Mark Scheel brings Ruscha's photography from the 1960s and 70s into conversation with contemporaneous cinema and cinematographers. And finally, Eva Enninger broadens the scope of this section to show how Ruscha was producing a timely critique of images as supposedly neutral transmitters of information. So why this term? I'll focus briefly on this idea of the image because it gets to the core of some of why this section can be a teaching tool and fill certain historical and historiographic gaps for students and educators. Our use of this term was an attempt to put specificity on it, interrogate its meanings, and the term image's relationship to a variety of media, as well as its period-specific usage in art and urbanism at the time. And in this capacity, the section's essays could productively be used in classes that are teaching method in visual studies or art history. It can be a fraught term in these disciplines because it can refer to many different media at once, but also often be used in imprecise or capacious ways, and we were interested in investigating this. One of the touchstone references for this section is Kevin Lynch's The Urbanist's Watershed study of the image of the city. And I should say that you will hear more about the context of urbanism from Emily in a few minutes. Lynch took seriously for the first time the way that mental images informed people's perceptions of cities. And importantly, his field research on images included extensive photography of 3 cities, Boston, Jersey City, and Los Angeles. So he, alongside other urbanists, were incorporating both art and photography into their studies. So Lynch's book is a great one to put into conversation in the classroom setting with the archive and these publications. And the term image is especially useful as well for Los Angeles. One of the big concepts that one has to cover in classes focusing on the city is that it's a city that has been uniquely overdetermined by its image and the reputation of its image. The filmmaker Tom Anderson has claimed that Los Angeles is both, quote, the most photographed city in the world, and the place where the relation between reality and representation gets muddled. So in classroom settings, looking precisely at images as such can help to put precision onto what that means. So the authors in this section take a close look at a broader field of photography and visual culture in Los Angeles. And they contribute to a growing field of scholarship that is looking more closely at the type of imagery and media that were being produced in Los Angeles at this time. And as Zanna mentioned, this section can also help expand teaching conceptual art in the city and what this meant for an artist like Ruscha. And to complement this, I should say for Los Angeles specific educators or those in the Southern California region, doing special collections visits with this material alongside other GRI archives, like those of Leonard Nadell, Harry Drinkwater, a collection of photographer Camilo Vergara, and Julius Schulman, can provide a holistic picture of a variety of different photographic activities at the time and allow students to see and investigate how different practitioners were codifying views and perceptions of the cities and compare and contrast in this really rich way with the GRI resources. The book, our publication, also lets us see a lot of images from the production archive associated with this project, digitized for the first time. And these are also very helpful for putting into context later iterations of Ruscha's project. I'm thinking especially of Ruscha's collaboration with artist Jerry McMillan in the first test shots of this project that help contextualize the later standardized images. Another way that this can be a useful teaching tool concerns the online platforms that Emily mentioned. Similar to other online photo tools, such as the Yale Digital Humanity Lab's Photogrammer that many of you may have used or be familiar with, which uses mapping and data visualization to look at Farm Security Administration photography. Our resources with the RCV and 12 Sunsets pair really well for in-class activities, especially for undergraduate courses. It allows students to gain literacy in looking through digital archives alongside these tools and begin to sort information and also home in on examples for more detailed analysis. It also helps to place tension on within photography surveys, the idea of the individual photograph versus the bulk of photos that are taken to arrive at a singular photo. As we know, photos have often been produced by the hundreds or thousands, and training students' eyes to understand that quantity is a critical tool, especially in introductory courses. When I have taught a class on Los Angeles, I have used the RCV as a form of a digital scavenger hunt to have students have to find things by terms and then discuss what they've found and discuss their process for finding it. Conversely, kind of on the other side, from bulk, this tool also allows for a close formal and technical investigation, comparing such things as different camera angles and approaches between shoots on the RCV, from moving to color shoots to black and white, and comparing these to, as well, digitized examples from the early production archives allows to see how Ruscha's method changed over time and the nitty-gritty of how that works outside of just the Every Building on the Sunset Strip book. So finally, all of these tools and the essays are a great resource for better understanding how photographers collaborated and seeing connections between photography and the urban. It's a great way to integrate and teach urban studies in photography courses and art history courses and vice versa. They are not isolated fields and should not be taught as such, and it's a great bridge to show students how to interrogate a project that involves multiple different professionals. With that, I will turn things over to Tracy, who will be talking about the archive.
Thanks, Isabel. So the essays in the archive section demonstrate the value of the Streets of Los Angeles project for examining different understandings and experiences of the word archive as used across artistic production and art historical practice. The book examines Ruscha's endeavor as a case study of archival creation, processing, and dissemination. It is therefore valuable as a concrete complement to high-level theories of the archive, for example, Derrida or Foucault. And before turning to the three essays in the archive section proper, I do want to point to a valuable resource in the project section called Archiving the Archive. Slide, please. Written by archivist Beth Ann Gwynn and two IT professionals, Lily Progil and David Newberry, all at the Getty, the text offers a behind-the-scenes look at the technical and manual labor required to turn hundreds of thousands of negatives into a searchable online database. This text introduces key tensions between the physical and digital forms of the archive that apply not only to Ruscha's project, but to all digitized material. For undergraduate researchers, undergraduate students who may be unfamiliar with archival research, let alone archival processing, this section provides a powerful entry point for learning about the practices and norms that make such research possible. Slide, please. This background is key for the 3 essays in the archive section, which connect across a central theme of the archive's limits. What do we expect or theorize the archive to do, and what does it do in reality? Slide, please. First, Emily Pugh argues in her essay, Some Los Angeles Streets, that Ruscha's archive is not merely a collection of photographs, but instead an engagement with information systems that organize data to generate meaning. Arguing that Ruscha's archive tests many of the underlying norms of archival work, she presents the Getty's digital processing of the archive as a transformative response to these pressures. Pugh's text thematizes the archive's massive scale, both when compared to traditional archives and to the individual artwork focus of traditional art history. Slide, please. In a classroom setting, this text could pair well with an activity using the Research Collections Viewer. Here you're seeing on the left the hierarchical view of the full archive contents, which is essentially a digitized finding aid, while on the right you see the individual photographs in a single 1966 shoot of Sunset Boulevard. Students might compare these two experiences as part of a discussion of the impacts of digitization on access. In addition to introducing art history students to concepts of the archive and its mediation, the project also fits well as a case study into histories of conceptualism or photographic history more generally, as a way to examine photography's dual role as an archival and artistic medium. Slide, please. The scale of the Ruscha archive also points to a critical lesson for students that archives are always incomplete. In many ways, a counter-argument to Pugh's text, Susan Laxton's essay Pneumopolis argues that the digital processing of the archive does not make it more usable, but instead limits it. Through her theoretical lens, the project exemplifies how archives, and especially digital ones, create a false impression of a universal knowable past. By contrast, she argues that the archive is defined by its exclusions, complementing essays elsewhere in the book and mentioned by my colleagues about specific absences in Ruscha's archive. These topics can tie into lessons on the archival turn in contemporary art, as well as longer histories of collecting and coursework in museum studies. Slide, please. Laxton's focus on the drawbacks of archival processes that make archive collections more usable, such as organization, classification, and labeling, also connects to Kate Palmer Alber's essay From Banks to Blanks. Drawing a line from Ruscha's automatic camera to modern computer vision, Albers examines how the literal vocabulary of contemporary AI systems recracks the questions of visual and textual language that are core to Ruscha's work. Her text highlights the limits of AI image recognition and helps students understand this technology, that this technology is not objective, even if it's in its more recent, more powerful forms. Like an archive, it is the product of interpretation of a limited data set that often reflects human bias. Slide, please. In addition, there's a feature in the project section called The Limits of Data that provides a kind of visual complement to Alber's text. Together, these elements of the publication may be used to spark discussions of AI in an art historical context. For example, as perspectives on the relationship between text and image, they might tie into theory and methods-oriented discussions of ekphrasis in art historical writing. Ultimately, the archive section of the book provides fertile ground for exploring the theoretical underpinnings of art history as an archival discipline. particularly its engagement with collecting, categorization, and the politics of visibility. The practical example offered by the Streets of Los Angeles project and the essays that examine it provide concrete ways for students to analyze how archives have shaped historical narratives and artistic meaning. And now I will hand it over to Emily to discuss the city section.
Thank you, Tracy. So the city section includes 5 essays on a variety of topics related to the intersection between Ruscha's archive and Los Angeles's built environment. Architectural historian Amy Murphy's essay, Now Before Then, explores the architectural evolution of Los Angeles over the course of the 20th century in parallel with Ruscha's project. In Streets of Another Los Angeles, historian Eric Avila considers areas outside of Ruscha's frame, looking in particular at Latino communities in Boyle Heights, a neighborhood to the south and east of Ruscha's primary focus area. In their essay on Ruscha's quote-unquote street-level view, urban planning historian Francesca Rusella Ammon, architectural historian Brian Goldstein, and geographer Garrett Nelson consider what can be learned about the kind of small-scale architectural development that Ruscha trained his camera on, but which is generally left out of post-war histories of American architecture. In her essay, architectural historian Gabrielle Esperdy, working with research scientist Damon Crockett, explores the possible use of computer vision to generate typologies or an urban grammar of Los Angeles architecture. Lastly, in Songs for Every Address, cultural historian Josh Kuhn considers Los Angeles's rich musical heritage, especially as it has informed social protest movements in the post-war, finding evidence of this history in Ruscha's photos of Sunset Boulevard. The essays in the city section are relevant to tracing histories of post-war architectural development that counter the typical accounts found in most survey texts. The 3 essays by Avila, Esperdy, and Ammon and her colleagues all provide novel perspectives on the city's physical and social evolution over the course of the 1960s through the early 2000s. Most standard architectural histories of this period focus on the East Coast, on new construction, and on large-scale projects designed by named architects. In contrast, as this image demonstrates, these essays examine vernacular architecture in Los Angeles. They also consider the urban built environment as a whole, as opposed to focusing only on individual buildings. These scholars look at development over time and from the perspective of the people, quote unquote, on the street. Avila, for example, considers social protest and artistic movements as responses to racist urban development policies that informed practices like redlining and the decisions of where to build freeways. In addition to these ground level views, the essays in the city section would be relevant to courses on the urban mythologies of Los Angeles, as Isabel has already suggested. While all of the essays in the city section touch on this theme in some way, Murphy's and Kuhn's are in particular useful for considering popular notions of Los Angeles in contrast to the lived and built environment reality of the city. While Murphy addresses the notion of LA as a uniquely sprawling, car-oriented city, Kuhn's examines it as a center of pop music. At the same time, these essays provide finer details of the city's history that complicate such stereotypical views. Kuhn, for example, covers not only mainstream commercial rock and pop in LA, but the Chicano and punk music scenes as well. He uses Sunset Boulevard as the literal and figurative through line to reveal the interrelationships of these diverse genres musically as well as socially. In a classroom setting, the essays of this section would work well as counterpoints to standard histories of post-war architecture, as laid out in texts like William J.R. Curtis's Modern Architecture Since 1900. These essays would also pair well with selections from Jane Jacobs' 1961 book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, which, while it does consider the street-level view of urban space, pointedly excludes Los Angeles. These essays, along with images from Ruscha's archive, would be very relevant to discussions of postmodern architecture as well, as explored through Denise Scott Brown and Robert Venturi's 1972 book, Learning from Las Vegas, or the short film Rainer Banham Loves Los Angeles from the same year, which is freely available online. Finally, two of the data visualizations from our book provide additional insight on these themes of urban development. Description as data demonstrates how data elements can be used as proxies to reveal power structures embedded in the built environment. Specifically, this visualization looks at how the appearance of the descriptive tag trees reveals the greater abundance of greenery in more affluent neighborhoods. Appearances of the tag the drawn from signage become a way to visualize areas of urban development. Place as data shows how Ruscha's images can be used to explore change over time at a specific location. At times, capturing informal interventions in urban space, such as graffiti. The practices illustrated in these two visualizations can be further explored by students on their own. Using 12 sunsets, for example, students can look at a single location on Sunset Boulevard over multiple years. They can also trace the appearance of tags like billboard, apartment, industry, or classical architecture at different points in space and time. We hope what we've shared with you today provides insights into Ruscha's archive, the Getty's project to digitize portions of it, and how the resulting book could be useful in bringing new perspectives to teaching on topics like Ruscha's own work, post-war photography, the archive in its digital and physical forms, and emerging art historical practices. So we look forward to hearing any questions you have for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the contributors for this curriculum workshop. I also want to take a moment to thank my colleagues in academic outreach, Sue Kang and Brianna Hernandez, for their facilitation of this event. And I'm just putting into the chat where you can find the recording of this curriculum workshop as well as other past curriculum workshops as well. So that is in the chat. And with that, we will stop recording and we will invite everyone to come back on screen